Today we are going to continue working on our I can statement of I can identify, read, and write decimal place value through the thousandths place. Right now I have a cube. This cube is signifying one whole thing. So I'm just going to kind of move it off to the side here, and this is my one whole thing. If I were to write that, it would just be written as a 1. But if we're going to include our decimals, it would be written as one whole thing. So my cube has a lot of different things within it. What would this be called if my cube is one whole? How many of these fit into my cube? That's right, 10. That means this particular flat is 1/10 of my whole thing. So this would be written as 1/10. 1/10 of my whole thing. So one whole, and this is 1/10. What if I have this item? Get rid of that. What if I have this item? How many of these longs or rods would you find in your one whole? That's right, 100 of these would be in your whole. So that would be 1/100th of the whole thing. And then lastly, what about this tiny little cube? How many little cubes fit into my whole thing? You guessed it, 1,000. So that would be written as 1,000th of my whole thing. One piece out of 1,000 pieces. So when we have decimal place value, each of our base 10 blocks can be used as a different place. So if we're using our cube as the whole, right there, the flat right here, kind of hard to see, the flat right there would be 1/10. The long would be 100th, and the cube would be 1,000th. 1,000 cubes go in the whole. 100 longs go in the whole. And 10 flats go in the whole. So this is how we can look at our decimal place value if we're using the cube as our whole thing. Now, what if I were to tell you that the flat is now our whole thing? How much would this be worth? How many of these are there in my flat? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there are 10 longs in my flat. So therefore, this would equal 1/10 of my whole thing. How many cubes are there in my flat? So I can keep counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And since I know there are 10 in each long, 10 times 10 is 100. So one cube is 100th of my flat. And this is where it gets a teeny tiny bit trickier. Because you're saying, Miss Davis, we don't have anything smaller than that, because the cube has always been the smallest thing. Until today. Here is a little piece. If you see how tiny it is. There are 10 of these in each cube. There are 100 of these in each long. How many would be in each flat? You guessed it, 1,000. So this piece would be 1,000th of my whole thing, if my whole thing was a flat. So we have just learned 2 different ways to use base 10 blocks to help us understand our decimal place value, using the flat as a whole in which this would be 1/10, 100th, and 1,000th, or using the cube as our whole, in which this would be 1/10, 100th, the cube is a whole, in which the flat would be 1/10, this would be 100th, and this would be 1,000th of our whole thing. So those two different ways that we can use base 10 blocks to represent our decimal place value when we have two different types of wholes, a cube as the whole thing or a flat as our whole.